If I asked you right now if you felt rich, you'd probably say no. Even if you're earning six figures, even if you've got a healthy offset account, there's a good chance you still feel like you're just 1 or 2 bad months away from a real problem. But the numbers tell a very different story. Today, I'm going to show you exactly where you stand in the Australian wealth hierarchy in 2026. Using the latest data from the ABS, Knight Frank, and the ATO, we're going to break down what it actually takes to crack the top 10%, the top 5%, and that elusive top 1%. Before we look at the big numbers, we have to address the average trap. According to the latest ABS data from late 2025 and early 2026, the average full-time salary in Australia has climbed to just over $106,000. On paper, that sounds like a lot. But as we always say on this channel, the average is a ghost number. It's the mean, which means a handful of surgeons, CEOs, and mining executives are dragging that number way up. The median, the person right in the middle of the pack, is actually taking home closer to $84,000. That gap between $84,000 and $106,000 is where the middle-class squeeze lives. It's why you might be earning what used to be a rich salary and still feel like you're treading water. Let's start with our first real milestone, the top 10%. To crack the top 10% of income earners in Australia in 2026, you need to be clearing roughly $184,000 a year before tax. This is the bracket of senior project managers, experienced school principals, and specialized engineers. But here is the reality check. Most people in this bracket don't feel wealthy. They often have the professional's burden. They live in the inner suburbs of Sydney or Melbourne to access these high-paying jobs, which means their $184,000 income is being eaten alive by a $1.2 million mortgage and private school fees. In the top 10%, you aren't flying private. You're likely driving a well-maintained SUV and flying Qantas. But you're still checking the price of avocados at Harris Farm. If we look at net worth for the top 10%, the number jumps significantly. To be in the top 10% of households by wealth, you're looking at a net worth of approximately $3.2 million. Now, before you switch off, remember how we calculate net worth in Australia. This isn't just cash in the bank. This is your home equity, your superannuation, and your investments. Because Australian property prices rose by an average of 10% in 2025 alone, a lot of families have accidentally woken up in the top 10% simply because they bought a house in a capital city 20 years ago. They are asset-rich and cash-poor. They're sitting on a $2.5 million home in Marrickville or Richmond, but they're still worried about the electricity bill. Now, let's move to the top 5%. This is where the air starts to get a bit thinner. To hit the top 5% of income, you need to be earning north of $250,000 a year. We're talking about senior partners in law firms, successful small business owners, and mid-level medical specialists. At this level, the math changes. You've moved past the survival phase of the middle class and into the lifestyle phase. This is the bracket where you stop worrying about the cost of a flight and start worrying about tax brackets. But here's the hidden insight. Most people miss completely. Income is a treadmill, but assets are an engine. Many people in the top 5% of income are actually further behind in the top 5% of wealth because they spend their high income to maintain the appearance of being in the top 1%. They're leasing the European cars and upgrading the house every 5 years. Meanwhile, the people who are actually in the top 5% of wealth, requiring a household net worth of about $5.8 million in 2026, often look much more boring. They are the ones with 3 or 4 unglamorous investment properties in the suburbs and a maxed-out superfund. They aren't trying to look rich. They're busy being wealthy. The gap between income and wealth is the most important thing to understand if you want to move up these brackets. You can earn your way into the top 10% of income, but you have to invest your way into the top 10% of wealth. In Australia, the tax system is actually designed to make it very hard to get rich purely through a salary. Between the 45% top marginal rate and the Medicare levy, the government takes nearly half of every dollar you earn at the top. This is why the truly wealthy in Australia focus on capital growth like property and shares, which are taxed much more favorably than your hard work. Now we reach the heavy hitters, the top 1%. According to the 2026 Knight Frank Wealth Report and updated UBS figures, the entry point for the top 1% of wealth in Australia has now climbed to roughly $8.3 million. If you own a house in a suburb like Vaucluse in Sydney or Toorak in Melbourne outright, no mortgage, you are likely already in the top 1% of the entire country. To be in the top 1% of income, you're looking at a taxable income of more than $380,000 a year. This is the realm of surgeons, anesthetists, and top-tier CEOs. But even at this level, there is a massive divide. There is the working 1%, the surgeons who are still trading their time for money, and the asset 1%, the people whose money works for them while they sleep. Here's the move that nobody talks about. The people in the top 1% of wealth rarely have most of their money in a savings account. In fact, in 2026, the wealthiest Australians hold their wealth in three specific buckets: 40% in residential and commercial real estate, 30% in equities or private businesses, and the rest in superannuation and alternative assets. They aren't saving their way to the top, they are owning their way to the top. But here's the reframe you need to hear. Being rich isn't a destination, it's a moving target. If you spent your whole life trying to hit the top 1% threshold of $8.3 million, you might find that by the time you get there, the threshold has moved to $10 million. If you're in your 30s or 40s and feeling behind because you aren't in these top brackets yet, you aren't alone. Most people at this age won't be there yet, and that's completely fine. The goal shouldn't be to beat the rest of Australia. The goal is to move yourself one bracket up from where you are now. If you're in the bottom 50%, aim for the median. If you're at the median, look at what the top 20% are doing. Even getting halfway to the top 10% gives you an extraordinary amount of power and freedom in your life. Wealth in Australia isn't binary. It's not that you're either rich or poor. It's a spectrum. And every smart decision you make, whether it's salary sacrificing into your super, picking the right low-cost ETF, or just resisting the urge to upgrade your car, moves you further along that spectrum. Don't let these big numbers intimidate you. Let them be a map. Now you know where the landmarks are. Now you know what the top actually looks like. The question is, what's the next move for your specific map? F. You found this valuable? Hit subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.